Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We will begin in about 1 minute. Good morning. On behalf of the National University System, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar series dedicated to building a bridge to online teaching. My name is Nancy Rowland Heinrich, and I serve as the Senior Vice President at National University. Your participation today demonstrates your personal and professional commitment to providing a quality virtual teaching environment for your students as you make this transition. Today's session is the second of the High Five series, designed to provide meaningful guidance and insight for K-12 teachers as they transition from a traditional classroom setting to teaching in a virtual environment. The focus of today's webinar is an important step in refining your online teaching skills by creating a digital presence in a virtual classroom. I would like to mention that last week we were extremely pleased to have over 1,200 participants register for the session, and we truly demonstrated the high level of interest and the commitment of our teachers. Please be aware that our panelists have read all of your comments and questions, and they will be integrating them into this session and the 3 upcoming sessions. Please note, we also had many of you that asked if you might be able to receive a certificate at the close of the series, and we will be able to provide certificates upon request at the close of the series for those who have participated in at least 4 of the sessions. So a special welcome to all for those of you who are returning from last week, as well as those joining for the first time. The key presenter for today's topic on creating a digital presence in the virtual classroom is Dr. Andy Shean, who is a very experienced K-12 higher ed online teacher and has worked in this field for over 15 years. He'll have a wealth of online teaching knowledge to share with all of you today. You all also receive additional insight from Dr. Colin Miller, who is the Vice Provost of North Central University. And at this time, I would like to turn the webinar over to our moderator, Dr. Steve Halfaker, a retired superintendent and online professor. Steve?
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everybody. I want to again give a shout out to our teachers, all of our teachers and educators out there who are making this transition to the online space. Thank you for what you do every day, whether it's online or in person. We just greatly appreciate it. Last week, we gave a kind of an overview, a broad helicopter view of our 5 topics from our expert presenters. This week, we'll go into more depth on each of the areas, but particularly this week, we're going to be looking at digital presence and critical thinking, which is what Nancy mentioned. We'll also be looking at the options and pedagogy in the online space in those 2 areas. Truly, it is an honor for me to welcome and to introduce in a little more depth Dr. Shean, with whom I've had the pleasure to work with in different projects over the years. Clearly, Dr. Shean is a leader in the online field of education. But prior to that, which is really important to me, Dr. Shean was a teacher. He was also a TOSA in Poway Unified School District, a TOSA of Technology, Professor of Technology, Dean of Education, and is now into the highest levels of educational leadership. Probably what impressed me most about Dr. Shean, other than his optimism and his enthusiasm for teaching and learning, was that he was Teacher of the Year in Poway Unified a few years back. And to me, that speaks volumes about his care and concern for students and about making a difference for every single child. And he has continued that even at his highest levels of administration now. So without further ado, it's truly a privilege to bring on Dr. Shean. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks so much for that introduction, and thanks for being a great mentor. And most importantly, thanks to everybody who's here and listening, whether live or those of you who might listen to the recording. We just want to be a blessing for you all. You guys are in the trenches making a difference every day, and we greatly appreciate you. So thank you so much. So today we're going to be focusing on creating a digital presence in the virtual classroom. And actually, before I begin, I wanted to just maybe couch us in something, which is something that one of my favorite professors in college used to kind of inspire me. And he used to leave like all kinds of like fun, crazy quotes on the wall, and he would never actually tell you what they meant. And the point I think he was making was like, get curious. And I think if you take nothing else from this presentation, I hope you just get a little more curiosity about the potential for teaching online in a really effective manner. So get curious, get curious. So hopefully I'm going to model some of the strategies that you're going to hear about today. And so I'll start by just making fun of myself a little bit. So that's my real license picture. That's how I feel on the inside every day. It was a long day at the DMV. Just something really quickly interesting about me. My wife and I won the Four Seasons $100,000 wedding. Let me just tell you that my friends should not have a $100,000 bank account at the Four Seasons. This is a picture where you can tell I'm starting to have a little too much fun, and my wife is about to look over at me and say, you know, stop it. So, and then just real quick, I'm a jokester. I love doing kind of practical jokes at work. And so this is an example where I took a picture of myself from high school, blew it up, framed it, and put it in our chief marketing officer's office. And it was in there for like months, and you never realized it. And people would come into his office and say, "Hey, why do you have a picture of Andy from high school in your office?" And so one of my many silly practical jokes. So, okay. So quickly trying to introduce, just strategy-wise, right? Like a little bit of me as a human being into the environment, which is going to be a key part of what we talk about, right? And that's what really digital presence is. It's omitting yourself into a digital world, whether that's a learning management system, whether that's on Zoom, whether that's through email or whatever means by which you're communicating. You want the student to think of you as a real human being that cares. And what I'd like for you to do, what I'd like to do at the beginning of the session is to really outline some strategies that can help you do that. And the way that we're going to try to do it is to do 3 different types of strategies, all right? The first is going to be things that, you know, relatively easy technology-wise. The second, you know, maybe a little bit advanced, and that may not be comfortable for you right off the bat, and that's okay. Maybe we just plant a seed. And the third is kind of more of that next level stuff. Once you've been in the space for a while, you start to get more comfortable, you can try new and better things. It's important to note that wherever you are, that's okay, right? Feel comfortable with just, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. Don't try to stretch yourself too far. I know this is all overwhelming for a lot of you, and so don't feel like any of these strategies are musts, right? Even the level ones that we'll talk about, the low-level tech strategies, those can be very impactful, okay? So we'll spend a little time on that, and then we'll get into critical thinking. And one of the reasons why critical thinking is such an important concept is because we don't, in the online environment, want to just do read this, take a quiz, right? Or write 10-page paper. We don't want to just, you know, do the minimalist type of learning. We can actually create in the online and learning environment types of learnings that are really engaging and inspiring and create that wonder and curiosity. And so I want to challenge us all to think about what are those kinds of strategies that make that online and learning environment that kind of electricity that I know you can create in the physical classroom. It's possible to translate that, okay? So without further ado, let's begin. All right, so level one, creating digital presence in the online classroom. So I was working in the Poway Unified School District, as Steve mentioned, as a TOSA. And one of the things the superintendent asked me to do is he said, look in our side of our learning management system. And he said, tell me like which teachers like really get into action, you know, who's just knocking it out of the park. And I remember at the time I was, you know, I'm going to go find like a teacher who's doing like gamification or simulation labs. And I thought for sure it was going to be this just like really far out kind of technology. What I found was actually the teacher that was getting the most action was just doing these LOL kitties in the beginning of every single announcement every single day in their classroom. And then underneath that LOL kitty, they would have their homework assignment. And students loved it. They were logging in. They wanted to see the LOL cat of the day. They were, you know, posting back and forth with each other and laughing and making comments. And this teacher had created this small, simple strategy, but was engaging students. And so something as simple as imagery in your classroom can bring students in, engage them, and create a sense of presence in the classroom, right? Doesn't take, virtual reality. It can be something very simple. Another great strategy to create digital presence in the online classroom is the use of humor. And so when I was teaching online as a high school continuation teacher, I would always send my students just little funny memes or, silly things that I just thought kind of brought them in, made them feel connected. Things that you might do in your traditional classroom, tell a joke, tease somebody, or whatever it is that you feel comfortable with in the classroom that you might, create that positive environment. You can do the same thing in the online environment. So something as simple as humor can go a long way. By the way, I love this particular this joke. My kid gets a kick out of this one. And so just, okay, well, once you have this idea of imagery or humor, what are some other things you can do with it? So I used to build this collection of memes and GIFs and images, and it would just be in a folder on my computer. And then, I would just consistently start to use them. And I would do simple things like if a student was behind or wasn't as engaged, instead of just saying, hey, student so-and-so, I need you to step up. Yeah, I'd send them a funny picture, send them something that might just grab that kid's attention, and then follow up with whatever it is I needed to do. So simple humor, imagery can create that digital presence. And you can also use those kind of strategies when you're dealing with tough subjects. As some of you are probably finding out, students don't always have appropriate, what we call netiquette, right? Appropriate manners in the online classroom. That might post things that are inappropriate or write in text tone when it's supposed to be more of an academic setting. And so you can use humor to remind them, right? So in this case, I'm sort of making fun of myself because I still literally am probably the maturity of a 12-year-old. But at the same time, I'm sending a message, right? This is an environment where we need to treat each other with respect, or this is an academic environment. This isn't you posting on social media with your friends, but doing so in a light, humorous way can sometimes be a good strategy. And then I think of the power of the affective, right? I mean, the cognitive and the affective, they go together when working with our kids, right? For all kids, but especially for kids that come from tough backgrounds. And I was one of those kids, and I can't tell you what a difference it made when I had teachers really care about me and inspire me. And I know you all do that every day in your classrooms, and the online classroom should be no different. And so this is just a simple example. I would find, movies or stories in the newspaper or from magazines, and I would capture things that I thought were really motivating. So this is an example of Catherine from Hidden Figures, that amazing story of the woman from NASA who ended up being a math genius, but because of racism and various other things, she wasn't allowed to reach her full potential at the time, and she didn't give up. She kept on pushing, and today she's a source of great inspiration for all of us. And so I'd find pictures like that, and I'd send them out to students. And I say, listen, I know it's hard, whatever you're going through, whether it's being stuck at home, missing your friends at school, whatever the context of the situation is. I would use these inspiring little stories to just remind them that other people have been through hard times, and we're in this together, and you can still accomplish great things. So keep going, right? Because Catherine did. And I'll also use, powerful stories. This is from Freeman Hrabowski. He's an amazing president and an inspiration. He's really well known for his work in STEM and disproportionate access students. And he's got all sorts of amazing things that he does. But I just stole this little quote that he shared about how he would motivate students, telling the story of Tella Ferrero and, the kind of powerful impact that education can have, and the fact that not everybody does always have access. And if you are one of those lucky folks that do have access to quality education, don't waste it, right? Because some people would, die to have it, right? So reminding students about, how important your education is and motivating them, right? You do those things in your face-to-face classroom. These are just strategies that you do in the online classroom. And so I might email this to students. I might share it with them in a one-on-one. I might open up if I'm doing a synchronous session in a Zoom with a story like this. The other strategy that creates digital presence in the classroom that's, I think, relatively low-level tech is simply imagery in whatever environment you're trying to teach your students through, right? I'm showing you an example of an environment inside a learning management system, but the same could be true of a Zoom or other webinar session. The same could be true of an assignment that you send to students via email, right? It can manifest in a lot of different ways. You're just seeing one example inside of LMS, but I want you to look at this page, and I want you to imagine you're a student who's used to the modern web. And when you click on whatever it is that you're clicking on, it's full of video and imagery, and it's very busy, and it's very engaging. And when you go to an online learning environment, if it's static, there's a real disconnect. There's a lack of engagement for that student. And so something as simple as imagery, and let me just show you an example, can really make a difference. It provides that digital presence, that sense of engagement, that sense of emotion, right, that you want students to feel, that draws them in. So just imagine if you're a student and you're into your learning environment and you see something like this versus something like this, that's a big difference, right? So low-level strategies can be really impactful. So I've mentioned things like humor, images. We've talked a little bit about the power of inspiration through stories, through examples in the news, and finally quotes. Quotes can be really impactful. I love this particular quote because I'm also trying to make a point, right? Which is the internet is a dangerous place if you think it can't lie. One of the most important skills I think we can teach all of our students, including higher ed, is digital literacy skills. And so, I'll post funny quotes that hopefully are a little thought-provoking, but also engaging. One more that you might think, is that digital presence? But I really think it is. And I think it's one of the more powerful teaching strategies is this idea of modeled examples. And somebody who's really made this famous is Salman Khan, and you probably know him from Khan's Academy. Khan's Academy really started off with him sharing basic screencasts of math problems with a family member, helping them with their math homework at a distance. That's how it started. And that's just an example of a modeled example. And so if you're working with your students and you're working on an assignment where they may not have home help, for example, you can greatly, I think, enhance your students' likelihood of getting it by giving them a model example, right? Like, what does that assignment look like when it's done well? And you might consider giving that ahead of time. You might consider giving them as part of your feedback, but modeled examples, particularly when they hear your voice, whether that's through commentary written, whether that's through commentary you embed through audio, really creates that sense of you as a teacher being present with them in the learning environment, which really results in engagement. So that's level 1 strategies, things that you can do that don't require a ton of technology, but that really make a difference in the learning environment. I'm going to kick it over to Steve because I'd love to hear some additional commentary on level 1 strategies.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Go ahead and feel free to join us. I just wanted to reinforce, Andy, that was awesome, and those are terrific ideas. One of the things that I do to try to create that engagement is I do something like a post of the week. Well, I'll give highlight somebody's post and tell why I thought it was wonderful. The other thing I like to do is I put a lot of feedback and input into my student papers, and so I tell them they have to click on an additional, link to get into their paper and see what I've written. So I just tell them that I've made these, 4,000 amazing comments that they better see on their paper or something like that to try to encourage them. They don't want to miss what I've put, on their paper, the kernels of gems of wisdom, whatever. I'll leave it at that. Colin, what struck you?
I really, and thank you, and I really liked, Andy, what you were discussing. And I think one of the things that we hear a lot from K-12 educators that are sort of new to online, and I think it's a concern, not a concern, but it's a cautionary impression, that it can seem depersonalized, and it can seem a little barren. And we encourage you to figure out, even if it's as simple as some imagery that brings out your persona in that space. I think your students will really respond well to that. And they're honestly looking for that kind of thing. So imagery, bring in music, bring in, stories about what you're going through or experiences you're having. Create those connections, because you're going to find that through those almost extra educational connections, you're going to be able to better have the educational one with your students.
All right, back to you, Andy.
I love the music one. I think, starting, particularly if you're a synchronous session, like starting with a little music or ending with a little music, or, you're midway through and you want to just, keep people awake, like music, that's a great strategy. So I just wanted to highlight that one, as well as Steve, your point about making sure your students are aware of your wonderful, wise comments before they open up the doc. But humor can be used in a lot of different ways. So it's a great example. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen City Slickers, one of my favorite movies. If you remember that when he said one thing, you know, I mean, gosh, that really hit me hard because I feel like I've got 1,000 things and I'm trying to have one thing. But one of the big takeaways I'd ask for you guys who are here and joining us is don't feel like you have to remember everything. Don't feel like you have to incorporate all these strategies at once. That'll be overwhelming. But maybe just think of as we go through each different thing, maybe there's just one thing that you might say, you know what, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that music thing. Or, you know what, maybe I'll try a funny image every once in a while, or whatever it is for you. Think if there's that one thing, that one strategy that you might want to try. Okay, so that's level one, right? Humor, images, motivational stories, music, etc. Level two is maybe just a little bit up the ladder of technology, but believe it or not, like learning a second language, the more you immerse yourself in it, the more you tinker, it starts to become more comfortable. And so a couple level two strategies I share with you that I think further creates that sense of digital presence is the use of video, right? And today you can do webcam to create video. You can use your cell phone. There's lots of tools that you can use to create video. And what I'm showing you is an example actually of a professor who we worked with a while back, who originally was very scared about the idea of video. She was scared because she didn't know about the technology. She didn't know, how am I going to look on video? How am I going to sound? Is it going to be comfortable for me? Just a lot of natural concerns. And what she found out is after she did a couple of them, she started to get more comfortable with the technology and she started to really like it, and her students loved it. And what you see here is just, you know, when she says, you know, meet your instructor, instead of it, you know, the written form, it's a video, you know, that she's introducing herself to the class and she's sharing a bit about herself. And then you can see these announcements in which there's these videos, and videos can be used for all sorts of stuff. It can be used to like go over the week. It can be used to talk about a difficult concept. It can be used to talk about feedback that in general the class needs to work on X, Y, Z. It can be targeted to an individual student. I mean, you can use video in the online classroom in a variety of ways. It's a little more technical savvy needed, but man, it can really create a positive impact as it relates to digital presence in the classroom, right? Which again is that student feeling like you're a real human being and you're connecting with them like they would feel if you're in the physical classroom. All right, now I will just tell you, in my experience, and this is just my experience, if I had to pick one tool, one that I could use, I would pick JING, or the concept, which is screencast. And so what is that? So JING is free. There are other tools out there, so I don't want to just say it's JING, but I like JING because it's free. And what it is it's a screencasting tool. You download it onto your computer. You can capture anything that's happening on your screen, and it captures your voice. So PowerPoint presentation, taking a student's paper, which is what you see the example here, and giving your student auditory feedback, explaining a difficult assignment. So I don't want to go into depth on how to use JING, and actually if you're interested, we can provide more support on that. But this idea of having a screencast tool where you can capture what's ever on your computer with your voice narrated, man, that can have a lot of impact. So screencast tools, JING being a free one, great strategy for creating digital presence in the classroom. All right, this is a little goofy, but I'm goofy, so I'm going to share it with you. I used to use this tool called Crazy Talk, and I was experimenting with stuff. And again, I really encourage you guys to tinker. I know that sounds maybe challenging right now if you're overwhelmed, but at some point as you get more comfortable, tinker, play around, stretch yourself. And so I did that with this tool called Crazy Talk. And so what's Crazy Talk? Crazy Talk is basically where you can capture the image of like a famous icon. It could be Kermit the Frog, it could be Tom Cruise, it could be whoever, right? And you have that image of their face, and you actually in the technology enables you very easily to move the lips around, and then you provide the narration, right? So an example is I was working with third graders and they were doing animal reports, and they were doing it on polar bears, or they're doing it on leopards or whatever. And instead of the student presenting the report, it was the polar bear, or it was the leopard with the student voice, with the mouth mirroring the words, and it was like instant engagement. The students loved it. I use Crazy Talk when I'm working with students who I feel like are kind of like losing engagement and I need to pull them back in. I'll do something like send them a Christopher Walken Crazy Talk and say, hey, you know, you've been gone for a while, you need to come back. And they kind of get a kick out of it because it's outside of the norm, and usually it brings them back in. So these kind of like off the cuff strategies can actually really create that digital presence and re-engage students. So Crazy Talk. Once you get more and more comfortable in the digital environment, and your students become more and more comfortable. And actually, I'd argue a lot of them are relatively digital savvy. I know it varies depending on your student demographics and all that sort of stuff, but typically students are becoming more and more digitally savvy. When they start to create content and share it with you and the class, then you've really got something powerful. And so what I have here is just an example of what we call digital storytelling. And my potato story, I won't share it with you, but it's an example of a digital storytelling that a student shared with her classmates about how hard it was coming to America from a different country and not having the language acquisition, and how painful that was for her and how it affected her self-esteem and what it made her feel like. And when the students saw that, I mean, first of all, it's instant tears. Second of all, it totally changed the way that they felt about her and reacted to her. And it was such a powerful moment. And so things like students creating content and sharing can be very impactful and create not only you, the teacher, creating digital presence, but then students creating digital presence with each other. Really increases the level of engagement in the class. So I know many of you are probably hearing this and like, that's a lot, that's overwhelming. Remember, only do what you're comfortable with. Maybe these are just seeds we're planting. But once you get comfortable and you start to develop enough of your assets, right? Got a couple videos you've done, got a couple JINGs you've done, maybe you got a couple crazy talks, etc. You start to build a portfolio that you can repurpose. And that's what this slide really is saying, is the more and more you get comfortable, the more and more you tinker, you start to create an asset library, right? And then it becomes faster and easier to be able to share this stuff because you already have some stuff already done. So think about that as like building up, just like you would in your classroom. You start over the years to like build lesson plans that you really like, right? Same concept. You build digital assets and you can start to repurpose them. So that's level 2, use of video, screencast, getting outside the box with JING, and getting your students to create and share content. That's that next level up. And again, the concept is don't try to do it all. Think about just doing one thing, right? What's one thing that you might tinker with when you feel comfortable? With that, let me pause and turn it over to Steve and Colin for commentary.
Sure, thanks, Andy. Those are just terrific ideas. And I just want to highlight not being born in the technology savvy group as a baby boomer. I found the easiest tool for, as you were calling, the screencasting, and it was in the LMS provided, embedded in the LMS. And I start with that and then began to be able to give video comments and introduce myself and do all of those things you mentioned. But I just encourage you, find that one tool that you're comfortable with, and then you, like Andy said, you can build on it over time as you get comfortable with it. And I have used JING, and I think it's a fantastic tool. Colin?
Yeah, thank you, Steve, and thank you, Andy. I think this is a really important part of the discussion. And I think one of the things that we talked about last time, and I'm going to really expand upon it at the next session as well, is it can be really intimidating to go try and look for those tools. And what you're going to find is there's a million things out there. And it's that, overwhelming sense of, do I need to know all of this? The answer, and Andy's making it clear, is absolutely not. Pick one, particularly if there's one supported within your district, leverage that. And I think what Andy's saying is really important. Get as comfortable as you can, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And you don't have to recreate the wheel every single time. So build upon your lessons learned. And one of the things that I'll spend some time next week talking about is there are pedagogically, curricularly, ways that you can approach using that tool really well for teaching writing, analysis of a draft, for math formulas, for art, for all history, right? So there's context that you can really leverage it. And there are ways that you can adjust it where you find yourself getting comfortable. So the key is do it. And I think that's what Andy's saying more than anything else. Get started, go do it, because whatever you do, it's going to help. And we promise you of that.
Thanks, Colin.
That's great. I just couldn't echo Colin's comments enough. It's intimidating. Don't feel like you have to do it all, but also don't be afraid to try. And you won't be perfect at first, and that's okay. That's okay, right? This is a place that it's okay to tinker. Okay, I'm going to move pretty fast through level 3, and actually what I really want to do is highlight our last webinar series, which will have an external speaker, Dr. Mike Kalaji, kind of talk about what's the future look like. So this is more of just of a seed planting. And what this slide really articulates is, in typical online environments, a standard practice is to have like an overview of a module or an overview of a week video, or you have a specific assignment video and you have like static content. We think like a best practice is, more of interactive learning and dynamic content. You want students doing, not just passively getting. And the future, like next level, is where we get into like gamification, immersive reality, virtual reality. That's where we get into the potential for like that situated applied learning or problem-based learning, project-based learning. And I'll just give a couple quick examples, which is, believe it or not, virtual reality doesn't have to be this extremely expensive tool set that not every student can afford. And right, believe it or not, Google Glasses, you can buy them for like Google Cardboard are things you can buy for like $5. And there's lots of free videos on YouTube or other mediums that have great examples. So here we just have a class in which it's talking about, it's a psychology class and it's talking about mental disorders. And in this case, the student's putting on their Google Cardboard for $5, and they're actually experiencing world through the eyes of a person with dementia. So really powerful learning experience. It's actually not as expensive as you might think. I love digital badging. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but because I'm going to talk about critical thinking in a second, I just want to highlight it, which is when you start, to provide students with real kind of motivators or incentives for doing good work, such as a badge, and that badge actually represents something. So like I used to teach intro to like education courses in college, and I used to give them like a Piaget badge, like, wow, you really went above and beyond, you get the Piaget badge, or the whatever famous educator Dewey badge, right? And it has just a little more meaning. If I could stress one thing, outside of like this kind of maybe futuresque kind of stuff, is always be asking your students. So key. Hey, did that work for you? Was that too technology savvy, or was that resonant with you? Did that create the digital experience we want? I know it sounds simple, but always be asking your students. They'll bring you great insights. By the way, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You can see I've got literally a lightsaber in my office, so it just gives you an idea of just what a geek I really am. I'm going to skip panel commentary for this one because I kind of want to move into the next section, and then we'll pause once we get through the first section, and we'll go back to panel commentary. So I want to talk about critical thinking for a reason, and it may seem like it's a little bit off in the context of creating an environment in which you omit yourself as a real human being and create that presence, right? And the reason why I've put them together is that oftentimes in online classrooms, because sometimes the technology might be difficult or there's a learning curve, what unfortunately can happen is a lot of passive learning, right? Like watch this video lecture, answer these quiz questions, or read this article and write this paper. And what I'm saying is, while some of that can be valuable sometimes, you don't want the experience to just be about that. You want to create an environment where you're bringing back like curiosity and wonder. And I just have one of my favorite books of all time is called The Road We Make by Walking, and it's by Miles Orton and Pablo Freire, who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And in this book, they're talking about what's the mark of a great education, and they're wrestling back and forth, as you might imagine. And eventually they come up with restlessness. Like restlessness is the mark of a great education. And so I think a lot about restlessness is like, how do you create restlessness? How do you create wonder and curiosity? And I think critical thinking is a good example of how you do that. And the one strategy I'm going to really hit hard with you today is in terms of how do you create restlessness, or how do you facilitate critical thinking that creates presence in the classrooms, by asking great questions. All right. So I'm going to quickly, hopefully reemphasize why I think critical thinking is important, and I'm going to get right to the strategy, which is asking great questions. So why critical thinking? Why is it so important? I was part of a Gates Fellowship, lasted over a year, one of the more powerful experiences I've ever had in my life. And when I first joined there with 32 other chief academic officers from around the country, their head of post-secondary ed stood in front of us and made a pretty powerful comment, which is essentially, we are entering into a period of time in our economy where if you are a student and you want to get a job, go to college. That was the message. You got to go to college. And so, well, what is college all about? Well, hopefully college is really about taking thinking to that next level, right? So that really struck me. Beyond that, I think of like articles like the one you're looking at right now by Forbes, who said like, what are the most important skill sets of the 21st century? And, number one, critical thinking. Look at number 2 and 3, problem solving and judgment and decision making. Those are essentially critical thinking skills. Study came out of Georgetown University, most important skills of the 21st century. Critical thinking, top of the list, and active listening, which I found is so fascinating. And remember, believe it or not, active listening is also about actually listening into an environment which is digital, right? Are you really reading that student's post? Are you really reading that student's text, right? Actually really engaging and listening to what that other person has to say, as opposed to just waiting for your turn to talk. At the end of the day, why critical thinking is because we want the anti-junk shot approach in online education. Instead, we want what Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure would title it so creates, which is education is not the kindling of the flame, it's the filling of the vessel. You want that restlessness, you want that curiosity. All right, now fascinating to note, before we dive into a strategy, we asked 100 of our professors to just define critical thinking. And as you might imagine, not one came up with the same definition. That's part of the beauty of critical thinking. It's messy, right? It's messy. There's not like that one cement definition. But it does help to have a couple of examples before I talk about strategies to get there. And this comes from Dr. Rod Sims. He's out of the University of Queensland, has an accent, so everything he sounds smart. But one of the things I love about his definition is this idea that it's, it's a process. It's a quest. It's not like one day you wake up and somebody gives you a certificate and says, congratulations, you're a critical thinker. No, it's never ending. You're always trying to improve the quality of your thought. Paul and Elder, very famous in the critical thinking world. If you're a nerd, you want to nerd out on critical thinking, Google Paul and Elder. They have a ton of resources. And what I love about this definition is they talk about it as an art, like an art isn't perfect science, like it's messy. And another giant in the critical thinking world is Stephen Brookfield. If you Google Stephen Brookfield, his book has tons of strategies on facilitating critical thinking in the classroom, many of which can be, with some work can be translated into the online environment. Okay, so I'm gonna spend the next 5 minutes really hitting the how. How do you create the kind of critical thinking in the online environment that you're after? And the strategy I'll focus on today is questions. You gotta ask great questions that are provocative, questions that inspire curiosity, and questions that are open-ended. And let me give you an example of what unfortunately happens in a lot of online environments, which is questions that are closed-ended and that don't go anywhere. Imagine if you're a student and you're in a discussion forum in an online environment and you get this question, what's an input, what's an output, respond to 2 peers. It's probably not gonna motivate you that much. You're probably not gonna stay up late at night, like searching for answers, and you're so excited what your peers are gonna respond back and you wanna see what your teacher has to say. It's pretty basic, right? And there's too many of these questions. So this is not the types of questions you want in the online environment that inspire, curiosity and wonder and restlessness. So a strategy that I like is to just think about basic blooms, right? You have the knowledge comprehension questions. Those are okay, but I would argue you might think about those manifesting in quizzes, right? As opposed to questions that you ask your class. And remember, questions can manifest in like a learning management discussion forum. You can ask them in synchronous sessions like a webinar, right? They can come in many forms, but ask those great questions. And you as the teachers, you're on this webinar, think about like what that might look like for a 2nd grader. What might that look like for a 9th grader? They're gonna vary, but this idea of asking questions that inspire curiosity or critical thought are key. I like to think of going into the higher level blooms. So let me give you an example, okay? Imagine that you just read this article, all right? Controversial article, already is gonna stir up some stuff for people, okay? You won't actually get a chance to read it, although you'll hopefully have access to the PowerPoint and you can go look at it if you like. But let's imagine we didn't ask great questions. Let's imagine that we had students read that article and we had them in a discussion forum or in a Zoom session or whatever the manifestation may be, respond, right, to that article and a question that might be like, well, who or what is the JCC? Or how much did individual claimants respond, pay out? I don't know that a student even has to read the article to answer those questions, or the minute that one student posts the answer, every other student has the answer. This kind of question doesn't inspire that deeper level thinking that we're after. So what happens if you took Bloom's and you took analysis and you tried to create a question that focused on more of analyzing what you read? So take a second and just look at this for a second and imagine if you were the student, you read the article and you were asked a question like this, right? Versus a simple closed-ended question like who or what is the JCC, what kind of motivation you would have to answer it, and what kind of curiosity or wanting to hear from your peers or your teacher might stir up in you, right? This is that higher level of engagement that creates that deeper level of presence inside of the online classroom. Same concept for evaluation, right? Think about this. Now you're transcending just the topic at hand. You're starting to get into moral and ethical issues. You're getting into personal issues. This is challenging to manage. You have to think about online etiquette. You have to prepare your students to engage in discussions like this. But I promise you, it's going to lead to much deeper levels of thinking and motivation. So I'm going to pause for a second and just quickly turn to Steve and Colin to see if they have any additional feedback or ideas, and then I'll close this down with just a few other strategies.
Andy, thank you. That was excellent. I'll just shift right over to Colin. And Colin, if you have any perspective, as Andy was mentioning on the lower grades, that would be great as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate, Andy, your great points there. And I think what I would say more than anything else is, particularly if you're somebody that's relatively new to this context, I think it's important to call out a tendency that you want to, as much as possible, avoid. And that is your tendency when going into a new educational environment as a teacher is to lock it down and as much as possible so that there's not risk. And the danger of doing that in this context is you don't open up the environment enough for the students to really engage, right? So you'll want to just lecture at them or record something, or there's this propensity to avoid opening the messiness of it. And what's really challenging in this moment, in the lower grades as well, is the more you go that route of making this a passive experience, the less connection you're going to make with the students. And that's something that I would really just want you to just get comfortable being a little uncomfortable, because that's when the really good education, that's when the really good connection with your students, lower grades, upper grades, but particularly those lower grades, they need to feel brought in. And I just can't emphasize enough your ability to open the environment to them to play with you educationally is going to be a really big part of it.
That's great. Thanks.
I just want to show really quick, one of the things I do is I just have questions from Bloom's taxonomy nearby. I'm going to show you, it's right here, but each category, it just, as I'm teaching, I refer to that, and then it just spurs me to ask better questions. So if you have a tool or something that helps you trigger the spontaneity and the discourse, I would recommend you use that.
Yeah, that's a great strategy, Steve. I love it. And I think having that, like, even by, your computer sometimes can be really powerful. So I'm going to go really quick, just a couple of minutes left. And more than anything, I'm hoping just to plant a couple seeds to further this idea of the power of questions and critical thinking to create digital presence. So not only using Bloom's, right, to ask those higher level questions, think about a recipe for what goes into that higher level Bloom's question. And so I think about creating emotional appeal, setting the scene. Obviously, you got to ask a great question, a question that goes somewhere, meaning you want to ask a question that, other students are going to want to hear your and their peers answer to. And this is important. You want variety, right? Once you ask a really good question, but it keeps manifesting in the same format, it can get boring, right? And so think about using questions that are powerful, open-ended, higher level Blooms, but in a variety of ways. So just a few. Here's an image analysis, right? So you're combining strategies, right? Imagery is a way to create digital presence. Asking great questions is a way to create digital presence. Combining them together is a bigger bang for your buck. Using concept maps. So asking a student something really simple, like what's happening here, right? And having a student have to think and figure it out. Debates are great. Now, you got to facilitate a debate. There's some time that goes into setting it up, but debates are great. Taking things in the news media, right? Think about the coronavirus right now and reading an article from one source versus another. And sometimes they say conflicting things, right? I mean, there's great examples out there in the media for us to use that are really relevant. I hope that this isn't how you feel, but I know there's a lot on this topic and probably tried to cover too much too fast. So I hope you don't feel like this. But if I could end maybe with a quote, and I'll kick it over to Nancy to wind this down. This actually comes back from my favorite professor, Dr. Joel Levine, who just kind of, blew my mind and inspired curiosity, right? Which is one of the greatest gifts I think education can offer, wonder or restlessness, as Miles Orton Pablo Freire might offer. So I'll read it to you real quick and I'll tell you what I think it means, although it might mean something different from you, and that's okay. It says, science is built of facts the way a house is built of bricks. but an accumulation of facts is no more science than a pile of bricks is a house. And so what's that mean, right? You can put education online, and you can offer it up to students, and maybe they get like a diploma, or maybe they get the credit, but it doesn't mean you're offering like a real education. And so I just encourage you to tinker and toy and think of that one or two things, right, that you really want to incorporate that create that digital presence, that wonder curiosity through critical thinking, that really offers students that deep education that I know you want to offer and they're hungry for. So with that, I thank you. I hope you got something from this. I truly enjoyed it. I'll kick it back over to Steve and Nancy to wind us down.
All right. Thanks, Andy. That was really wonderful. I've heard that before. Every time I get something new, and I really appreciate it. I just want to let Colin give just a little bit on what you're going to see next week from his presentation. Colin, would you like to, I know you mentioned it, would you like to add anything else?
Just that I really look forward to the opportunity and really to explode and expound upon, what Andy's talking about, and that is to go over what are the different ways you can approach being present and engaging with your students. What are the tools that are available to you? Kind of going over different categories of tools, talking about what LMSs you have out there, and just giving you a rundown of all that. So I really look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Colin. All right, Nancy, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. What a wonderful webinar. And Andy, Colin, Steve, that was fabulous. And you can see the collective wisdom from this group will help you make that transition, providing many tools and tactics that you can start using immediately. And I thought the discussion on critical thinking was just excellent. So we certainly would like to thank our moderator, Dr. Halfaker. A special thanks to our primary presenter today, Dr. Andy Shean. You can see that he is was a teacher in K-12, and I think that many of the tools that he's giving you can be applied immediately. And Colin, we look forward to your session next week. I'd also like to acknowledge Rachel Escobedo and the Sanford Education team for hosting our webinar series. As you know, we really appreciate your participation, but we have 3 more sessions. Colin has described his session that will be held on May 8th on teaching through engagement in the virtual classroom. On May 15th, we have Shannon McCarty, who will be presenting on practical application for teaching STEAM in a virtual classroom, which, it is a little bit more challenging with some of those areas. And Shannon is a former middle school science teacher and will have a lot of insights on that area. And then Andy did give you some information on our final session, which will be held on May 22nd, on the future of virtual education and what's next. So I'd like to, for just a moment, just share some of the resources that we have. So we've got the webinar series. We have a very helpful site online that will provide you just a wonderful group of resources related to K-12 teaching. Our Sanford programs have free toolkits online in Inspire at Home, Harmony at Home, and then National University and National University Virtual High School are providing 3 free courses for California residents. So this webinar is brought to you as a collaborative effort from the National University System. So I would just like to thank our partners at National University, North Central University, National University Virtual High School, National Educational Partners, and also the Sanford Harmony and Inspire programs. So we look forward to seeing you next week. And please know that we'll be there to support your needs, not only for teachers, but this hopefully will make a positive impact in your classrooms and your students and the other resources that can be used by families. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next week.